It's interesting that the sort of flip side of BJP overconfidence in India is the British Labour Party's underconfidence going into the election, despite the fact that it had very long-running poll leads against a very unpopular government. And of course, Labour did end up with more than 400 seats, which the BJP didn't, and won by a landslide. But one of the things that Labour's underconfidence led into, and I think we talked about this quite a few times in the first half of the year, that the Labour Party in the UK loses elections so often that no one believes it's ever going to win an election, even when they clearly are. They ended up taking a really sort of cautious pitch to the country in many ways, and in particular, they were really cautious about tax. So although everyone knew that the economy was in a bit of a state, that wasn't really as much of a debate in UK politics in the run-up to the election as it might have been. Labour's big pitch was about reassurance. It was, we're not going to raise the main taxes that people pay: income tax, national insurance, VAT. You won't be worse off. Promises that they made were not particularly. They weren't massive promises about huge change, even though their slogan was the one word change. And that has, since they did win quite big, that has really paid off in all sorts of ways that have been quite bad for them ever since. So it's really interesting. I think there's a genuine question about whether Labour would have won as big as it did if it had had a more sort of radical pitch than it did, and said, yeah, we are going to tax you a bit more, not just those rich people over there, but everyone's going to have to pay a bit more in order to deal with the fact that our public service is in a bit of a hole. They didn't do that, and that may well be one of the reasons why they were able to win as big as they did. But the consequence of that has been that they've been really constrained in office in their first few months. So although they have had one large tax rise on, well, it's paid by business directly, so it doesn't come out of my pay packet as an employee. But it's certainly the national insurance rise on businesses is one that constrains people's ability to hire, and people argue quite convincingly that it's a constraint on economic growth, which is a big thing that Labour needs. But they've been able to say that they're not going to hit people's pay packets, and that remains true at the moment. But that limits enormously the overall amount of money they're able to raise and the overall amount of change that they are able to deliver, at least insofar as some of the change that's required is about investment and money. So we've ended up with a story where through the year, almost without exception, we've had a really unpopular government. We had an unpopular government for the first half of the year that everyone was fed up with and they wanted to kick out of office, and they did. And then an unpopular government in the second half of the year that had just won by a landslide, but wasn't receiving the sort of honeymoon that we quite often see governments having. So Raha mentioned this sort of moment of the year. I think the moment of the year in the UK was, I think, Emily, I remember you talking about this back when it happened, of summing up British politics for you was the moment when Rishi Sunak stepped out in the rain to announce that the election was happening without an umbrella, with the Labour Party anthem, "Things Can Only Get Better," blaring in the background from a loudspeaker from a protester 100 yards away, and just the most shambolic election launch event I can remember seeing anywhere in any country. And it's not the reason why the Tories lost the election. The Tories lost the election for all sorts of structural reasons, and some of them actually I think we can talk about later on. I'd like to say a few things about the broader global trends to against incumbency, which the Tories lost out from as much as anyone else did. But nevertheless, I think that was the single sort of symbol of the year of a government going out of office. And I think what's really interesting is, as you were saying just before we started, that although Keir Starmer is not standing in a rainstorm quite literally, he sort of metaphorically is still standing out in the rainstorm without an umbrella in quite an unpopular position. Plenty of years to go till the next election. So, it's not a situation where he's in immediate danger, but we've got, as we started the year, an unpopular government, public services in a bit of a mess, and a government that doesn't entirely know what story it's telling and where it goes from here. So change and no change at the same time.